Been a lot of talk about Dan Mullen. Is the job Dan Mullen's if he wants it?
I'm not going to comment about the details of the search. I reached out to him a year ago.
So there you go, straight from the head ball coach himself. Doesn't really give anything away there with regard to which direction Oklahoma is going to go with the offensive coordinator hire. But in recent days, it's become about two candidates, Dan Mullen and Ben Arbuckle. Mullen, of course, the 52-year-old former Florida and Mississippi State head coach who has two national titles under his belt as a play caller with the Gators and 13 years of SEC head coaching experience. And Arbuckle, the 29-year-old wonderkin from Washington State, by way of Canadian Texas, where he's originally from. He's been at the helm of a very prolific Cougar offense for the last two seasons. They had Cam Ward under center a year ago. They have John Mateer under center this year, and both guys obviously experienced spectacular production, turned in spectacular production in Arbuckle's scheme. That's where things sit, Jesse Crittenden. I am Parker Thune. This, of course, is Quick Slants here on the OU Insider YouTube channel. And I will let you have the floor because I don't think you've really had the chance to weigh in a super in-depth capacity since it became apparent that it would be, in all likelihood, either Mullen or Arbuckle as Oklahoma's next offensive coordinator. How do you think those two stack up alongside one another?
Yeah, look, I'll say this, and I think it's important to say that, especially given OU's situation of where things are, a 5-5 season, speculation about Brent Venables' future, the uncertainty with trying to keep this 2025 class together. There's so many things to factor into where Oklahoma's at right now, and then you bring in the not only the uncertainties, but how quick things can change in a coaching search like this. There's a lot of factors you can dive into. So instead of talking about that, Parker, I'll just talk about what I think makes the most sense for Oklahoma. And to me, I have always been a little bit more in favor of a guy that's young, a guy that's early in their career, and a guy that probably has less head coaching aspirations or even experience than someone like Dan Mullen. Now, obviously, a guy like Dan Mullen, when you get experience, when you get the track record of success, obviously there's appeal there, and it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense that these are the two guys you're looking at because Parker, they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? One guy, a veteran, a older guy with a lot more experience, and a younger guy that's kind of a hotter name, more up and coming, a guy who's in the business right now, as opposed to Mullen, who's been out of it. Parker, I think it makes sense. They both bring kind of different offensive philosophies on top of that, but both have some semblance of a track record of success. Parker, I'll just say this: with someone like Ben Arbuckle, it's a guy. I mean, he's at Washington State right now. He's a guy with Texas ties, a guy that I think could bring maybe less ego, but more of a maybe a revitalizing philosophy to this offense in a way that this offense needs it. Where I think if you bring in someone like Dan Mullen, you obviously get the experience. You get a guy who's been there, who's been in the SEC before. But at the same time, if you're thinking about what does this program need the most, I think they need a fresh vision, and I think that's ultimately something that Ben Arbuckle could bring. So either way, I think it's not surprising that we've already seen some twists and turns and some things change and evolve throughout this search of the last few days. And I'll tell you this, Parker, I thought Brent Venables answered the Dan Mullen question in the most Brent Venables way possible, which was trying to do the responsible thing of not saying anything and then not helping himself by saying just a little bit at the end. It was the most Brent Venables thing ever. It really was.
And I'll tell you what makes the potential hiring of Arbuckle all the more exciting. Obviously, you could bring in a guy with Mullen's track record, that speaks for itself. But what compounds the excitement surrounding the potential hire of a guy like Arbuckle is what could happen if OU were also able to get John Mateer as part of an unofficial package deal, if you will. He's from Little Elm, Texas, 2.5 hours down the road. You don't really have to overthink that one. It makes all the sense in the world that if Ben Arbuckle is at Oklahoma in 2025, John Mateer is also at Oklahoma in 2025. So that will be something to watch, no doubt. The other thing that Brent Venables discussed today, and it's no shock that he was asked about it, given the news yesterday that five-star Oklahoma offensive tackle commit Michael Fasusi is going to visit Texas and potentially Texas A&M in the couple of weekends leading up to National Signing Day on December 4th. He was faced with questions about his recruiting philosophy and policies at Oklahoma. First and foremost, he cleared up one very common misconception surrounding that policy.
I just wonder how that policy has kind of evolved as NIL has taken the kind of center stage with some of these kids.
If you're visiting other schools in the present moment, you're not committed. That's what I would say.
Their offer pulled?
Is that part of my policy?
I'm asking, has
Oh, you're asking I never said that.
And there you go, Jesse. It's important to understand that Brent Venables and Oklahoma aren't going to walk away from a guy if he's committed and decides to take a visit elsewhere. What they're essentially going to do is operate within the building as if that individual is not currently committed. And they will adjust their strategies in the recruiting game as such. But Brent Venables was also asked what his message would be to offensive recruits at this time, given Oklahoma's struggles, the instability that seems to sit beneath the program right now as the Sooners sit at 5-5 and in major danger of missing a bowl game for the first time since 1998. It was a bit of a lengthier soundbite from Venables, but here's what he had to say in that regard.
We've discussed that in here, just in regards to who we've been. Our first 2 years here, we're a top 10 team, top 5 in several categories. We've been incredibly explosive. We've been a very attractive offense for skill, for offensive line development. Nobody's done it better than Coach Beatonbow. He's got an amazing track record at the very highest level, both in college and guys' opportunity to go to the NFL and play and be prepared to play at a really high level. But again, between running backs and our skill guys and the quarterback play, it's been outstanding. This year, it hasn't represented our standard in any way, shape, or form. There's been incredible disappointment, and you don't have a lot of excuses that are great for it. But I do think our guys recognize, the recruits recognize that, hey man, that we've got several guys that haven't been out there that would be very productive for us, from an injury standpoint. And it also, hey man, what a great opportunity this is to go to a place like Oklahoma that's got a top 10 defense, got great special teams units. Now, if we can get it just a little bit better, get healthy on offense, I can come in and contribute, because we're talking about a group of recruits that are very highly thought of, highly sought after. These are guys that have a great opportunity to come in and help make us better. We played 7,044 snaps of freshmen and sophomores through our first 10 games of the season. So, we've shown the willingness to play young players, not only to play them, come in and be starters. And we've had several guys that have been able to do that. Or when they've gotten in the game as true freshmen, they've come in and played really, really well, whether that's defense or that's offense or that's in the kicking game as well. So great opportunity is what I would say, and believing in people. And this is a staff that's a championship staff, a staff that's had success at the highest level for a long time. And so when you look at a body of work, there's more reasons to support their original decision than not in choosing Oklahoma, knowing that they're going to have a great future.
Clearly, Jesse, he had that statistic prepared. 7,044 snaps this season for freshmen and sophomores. That's not something you just know off the top of your head. That's something that you got a pretty good idea you're going to be asked about, and you want to have that answer ready. And Venables did.
Yeah, no kidding. And when you think about where Oklahoma is right now at 5-5 with 2 games left to go, that they're at best not going to be favored to win, right? At that point, you do have to start thinking about the big picture of things and where the program is headed. And part of that is obviously talking with recruits who are, some of them at least, going to have reasonable concerns about where this thing is headed. Parker, to me, I think there's a lot of criticisms that you could throw at Venables and this coaching staff this season, and a lot of them would be completely justified. As far as the policy, when it comes to how they're handling recruits that visit other places, this is about the most reasonable thing you could say, right? It's not about pulling an offer, but once if you're a recruit and you start making other visits, you kind of have to operate under the assumption that they are not a lock to come to your program, right? And that's a tough balance to walk. As far as the pitch to offensive recruits, really things are in flux right now, Parker, right? Because they still haven't made the offensive coordinator hire. That's going to have a huge impact on things, right? Not only in terms of what vision they're going to bring, but in terms of what the offensive staff looks like. What do the rest of the coaching staff looks like? What does the transfer portal bring in terms of guys that leave the program or come in? So I think that's a hard thing to pitch, but he's right. One thing that you can lean on right now, one thing you can say is there's going to be ample opportunity for young guys to make an impact next season. So whether that's someone like Michael Fasusi or even other guys that are going to come back next season. And when you look at guys like Taylor Tatum or Jaden Jackson or Eli Bowen, there's a lot of guys, even Heath Ozida, I mean, redshirt freshman. There's guys that have gotten a lot of playing time that are younger guys this season. And when you look at OU being 5-5, you would have to think there's going to be even more opportunity for young guys to have a statement on the program. So I think that is one thing you can lean on if you're Venables, and the rest of it, all you can go about is saying what you know right now, which is that Bill Bedenbaugh is on staff. This program has a history of explosive offenses. Those are the type of things you can pitch right now.
And as far as Fasusi is concerned, one thing worth noting here is that 3 Oklahoma commits thus far in this cycle, and 3 very high-profile Oklahoma commits at that, have taken visits elsewhere. Amarian Robinson has visited Arkansas. Cortez Mills has visited Nebraska. And, oh my goodness, I just completely spaced on the third. It'll come to me.
Cortez?
Yeah, Cortez Mills to Nebraska,
Oh, you
Amarian
mentioned
Robinson to Arkansas, and then Cortland Guillory to Texas
yes,
was the other one. So there is even direct precedent for Texas being the school that an Oklahoma commit visits while pledged to the Sooners. All 3 of those guys, Jesse, despite the fact that they've taken those visits, they're still committed to the University of Oklahoma. There's still 15 days for that to change, but they have not wavered to this point. So simply because Fasusi is visiting Texas and potentially visiting Texas A&M does not necessarily indicate he's flipping. You cannot have the expectation that he winds up in the class right now, as is the case within the walls of the Switzer Center. They are operating as if Fasusi is uncommitted because, as Venables said, we have to assume that if you're taking other visits. But there's also the very real possibility, that this is all just a leverage play from Fasusi and his camp to squeeze the most NIL out of Oklahoma possible before he lands and signs with the program that he has given every indication that he really wants to be at. And that, of course, is Oklahoma. Look, it's about the big picture stuff right now for OU as they begin to look ahead to the offseason and the 2025 campaign. 2 more games left. Let me ask you this in closing, Jesse. What do you think is the most important thing for Oklahoma to showcase to their recruiting class and uncommitted/interested recruits down the stretch against Bama and LSU?
Yeah, it's an important question, and a lot of people are obviously going to look at the offensive side of the ball because Parker, as much as it looked like maybe things had improved somewhat against Ole Miss, especially in that first half, the reality is this is a team that's only scored 30 offensive points their last 2 SEC games. So I think in addition to wanting to see just more of an offensive output, right, which is not going to be easy against a really tough Alabama team. I think you also want to see some young guys like Xavier Robinson, who Brent Venables also talked about. I think you want to see those guys get some run, not only because a lot of those guys have deserved it. I mean, Xavier Robinson might have been the brightest spot against Missouri, but because I think that goes to further showcase 2 recruits that you can come right away and potentially have an impact. But I think, Parker, the main thing, and this is kind of an intangible, really broad thing, but I think you just want to see buy-in. I think you just want to see effort. I think the toughest thing that could happen for this Oklahoma team when you're a 2-touchdown underdog at home against a top 10 team. I think the worst thing you could see is a team that is visibly giving up on the field, because that raises questions, right, about their ability to finish the season. It raises questions about how many guys could potentially enter the portal. It raises questions about the buy-in to Brent Venables in general, right, which only would further add to the seeming instability around the program. So I think more than anything, from a fan standpoint, from a recruit standpoint, I think you just want to see a team that is outmatched and that isn't going to be favored to win this game just put together a real effort, a real team effort with buy-in from guys all over the field, because even if that happens and you still lose, that still would send a positive message moving forward that there's belief in Brent Venables and that recruits are going to come in to an atmosphere that not only is still healthy, that is still a good culture they want to be a part of, but again, something that they want to be a part of and contribute to. So I think it's a very broad, hard thing to put your finger on necessarily, but I think that's the thing you want to see more than anything.
Hey, my phone's blowing up with intel on the OC soap opera, folks. OUinsider.com is the place to be right about now. Only going to cost you a few bucks a month, and trust me, we're going to make it worth your while, especially during a coaching search. There is no better spot on the internet than OUinsider.com. The best insight, the most comprehensive insight on everything that's going on behind the scenes in the OU football program, pertinent to the recruiting class, and so much more. That's where you'll find my work, Jesse's work, the work of our fine colleagues, Brian Clinton, Brody Lusk, Brandon Drum. OUinsider.com, folks, is where you're going to want to start hanging out over the course of the next couple of months. In particular, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. That doesn't cost you a thing. You'll still get plenty of our surface level insight. You won't miss any of the videos that we create on the daily for you folks here on this channel. But if we don't see you over on OUinsider.com, and I hope that we will certainly see you on this channel again next week with another installment of Quick Slants. For Jesse Crittenden, I am Parker Thune. Take care, everybody.